Hey, y'all, we got a little bit of breaking news. Some documents were just dropped in the Bryan Kohberger case. We're going to look at them, review them, and give my opinion on what it is that's going on here. Please hit that like and subscribe button and ring that notification bell if you're not already subscribed. With that being said, let's get into it. So, this comes from the district court in the Second Judicial District of the state of Idaho and for the county of Latah. So let's. This was filed by Ann Taylor, public defender, that is representing Bryan Kohberger. So this is the defendant's third supplement for request of discovery. Do you guys starting to get the feeling that maybe perhaps the prosecution isn't turning over all their information, and kind of wondering why they aren't? I don't. I've never been a lawyer or anything like that, so I'm not sure why, or if there's a plausible explanation why there has to be a third supplement request for discovery or so much discovery. From my understanding, the prosecution is supposed to give the evidence that they have to the defendants so that they can create a reasonable and a plausible defense for themselves and to defend against the evidence that is being presented against them. I don't understand why the prosecution here in Latah County is, having to go through a third request for discovery. There was been the Brady Giglio situation, or things that people have talked about and brought up, and that documentation that has come up, last month or so. And looking into that, we discovered that the prosecution and the police there in Moscow had withheld body cam footage during the Stickergate situation. And it wasn't until after they had, the officers had gone under oath and lied basically about not having the body cam footage, was that body cam footage surfaced. And they still haven't given up the audio in that case. This department, this prosecution sure does seem to not want to work within the realm of the laws, or even, and that comes to and with media. When you look at the situation with the 911 tape and the media having to basically challenge the prosecution and the county of Latah County because they're not wanting to release certain information that is the right of the public and of the media to have and to utilize in the way that they normally do. Well, let's get into this. Please take notice that the undersigned, pursuant of Rule 16 of Idaho Criminal Rules, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, Article 1, 1, 2, 13, and 17 of the Constitution of the state of Idaho, request discovery and inspection of all materials discoverable by defendant per ICR. And the aforementioned constitutional provisions include, but not limited to, the following information. And so I get, and I'm sure a few of you guys are going to come out and say something to the effect like, they had to ask for this information. That's not necessarily true. A defendant has the right to know what the evidence is against him or her. So this goes here, standard lab discovery. So all of this, I kind of read through it a little bit, is referencing DNA and lab, where the DNA was collected, tested, things of that nature. So first one says biological testing case file. Please provide a complete copy of the case file, including all records made by each laboratory in connection with the biological testing in this case. Now, each laboratory is it could be boilerplate, or it could be because, we've gotten some bits and pieces of information that have alluded that the Moscow lab didn't find anything on the knife sheet, that it had to be sent off to a lab in Texas, and that Texas lab, which happened to have a startup or be a startup, whatever the case might be, was what discovered the DNA on the button snap. Right now, in the probable cause affidavit, it doesn't say that. There's nothing there that says a lab in Texas found this. It says the Moscow Idaho lab detected a single source of DNA. And so it could be boilerplate to put each laboratory, but it could be also a situation where they, in fact, want the information from both labs, if it indeed happen to be or happen to go to multiple labs. So this says including biological screening, serological testing, presumptive testing, microscopy, and DNA testing, including statistical calculation. Please provide photographic quality copies of all the photographs in the original case file, including photos of the evidence. Now, remember, there was, and I don't know the exact numbers, but when the defense or the prosecution turned over what we saw was a discovery, in my opinion, I saw how many pictures they had taken, and it said something around 1,000 or so. And I felt that wasn't really enough for a case like this, given the fact that you have a huge crime scene. You have multiple layers of a residence. You have inside, outside, and also what evidence you would need of or pictures of any other evidence that you would see. I felt that it was a little bit low. And it kind of seems like maybe perhaps the defense doesn't feel like they've recovered all of the photos that the prosecution has. They want the chain of custody of current disposition of evidence. Please provide copies of all records of that document that treatment and handling of biological evidence, in this case, from initial point of collection up to current disposition. This information should include documentation that indicates where and how the materials were stored, temperature and type of container, and the amount of evidence material that was consumed in testing, the amount of material that remains, and where and how the remaining evidence is stored. In the event that the chain of custody spans several different agencies or laboratories, there it is again, please address the request for each agency and laboratory that handled said items. And so this is, they're like, they should have gotten this information during discovery and during the first request. I don't understand why they didn't get that then. And, now that they've had to go through to 3 of them and having to go into great detail about the evidence that they are inquiring about, leads me to believe that the prosecution is, holding a lot of evidence close to the chest. And whether you think that's right or wrong, legally, it's not, in my opinion. Everybody should have a right to defend themselves. So profiles uploaded to a DNA database. In the event that the case involves uploads of DNA profile to either local, state, or national database, LDIS, SDIS, or NDIS, please provide all documentation maintained by the testing laboratory, including documentation maintained by Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS. Personnel with the laboratory include profiles that have been identified as unknown males, not the defendant. Now, again, this could be boilerplate and just normal verbiage that you would see in a law documentation. I wouldn't put too much into it unless there is actually something there that indicates that there is unknown male DNA that's still there. So this says 3.1 documentation of all uploads, including interpretation or deconvolutions of mixed profiles, handwritten notes, spreadsheets, match, estimated results, uploads forms, and CODIS search forms. 3.2, for each hit, please provide match detail reports and long form candidate match reports for the hits, including partial hits and hits that are dispositioned to be non-matching, even if the laboratory has dispositioned a profile as a hit. Any state manuals regarding the use of SDIS or NDIS database systems and any hits made to any public profile upload, even if the hit on the individuals is not the defendant and deemed to not be the candidate matches, include hits of any unknown males identified via testing. So, like I said, they're just really trying to get as much information in the evidence about the DNA. Data files, please provide copies of the computer data files created in the course of performing the DNA testing and analyzing the data in this case, both raw data and processed data. These data files should include all sample files, project files, matrix files, size standard files, and analysis method files. In the event that the particular data file cannot be produced, please provide name and said file with explanation for non-production. 5, statistical calculations. Please provide a copy of all statistical calculations are taken with regard to the DNA testing in this case, including standardized statistical tests, database match probability calculations, and statistical calculations that were undertaken using software programs performing biostatistical calculations such as probabilistic genotyping programs. Please provide information for all analysis undertaking under those that were not used or were not reported. These materials should include a list of the software programs used, including version numbers, reference population, allele frequency used for the analysis, all handwritten or electrical notes pertaining to the analysis, any electronic data files that were generated for inputting genetic information into a software program, all documents and electric data files generated by the software program, all input and operator selected parameters used for the analysis, any instructions given to the operator for or of the software program with regard to input and operator selected parameters used for the analysis. And this is all information that they're getting to basically go after the DNA to make a defense and perhaps maybe even talk about its validation, right, or reliability of the DNA. Now, one thing that I haven't noticed yet is DNA from the car. Nothing says anything about DNA from the victims or things of that nature in his vehicle, which is kind of worrying me if perhaps maybe they didn't find any. We'll continue. Standardized operation protocols and interpretation guidelines. Please provide a copy of the standardized operating protocols, SOPs, and interpretation guidelines relied upon to perform and interpret the testing. In this case, include serological testing as well as all subsequent versions of these documents. Interpretation guidelines should include those that address peak detection thresholds, stochastic thresholds, interpretation of mixed samples, declaration of inclusions, exclusions, and non-conclusive findings, police policies for reporting results, and statistics and software programs used to perform biological calculations as probabilistic genotyping programs. So this is referencing the DNA that they found in the trash there at the Kohberger residence that was linked to Kohberger based off of his dad's DNA. If used in this case, which we do know that genotyping was used. So please include any applicable memos concerned with deviations from established procedures for any probabilistic genotyping program used. Please provide standard operating procedures, including any user manuals from the provider and any memos regarding updates to the software. Validation summaries. Please provide a copy of the validation summaries for internal validation studies undertaken to establish the interpretation guidelines relied upon in this case, including studies that address peak detection thresholds and a bunch of those other things that we talked about. Please include validation summaries for any probabilistic genotyping program used. In the event that an enhanced detection method was used in this case, please provide a copy of the validation summary for said method. In the event that the software program was used to perform biostatistical calculations, is this case, please provide a copy of the validation summary for said program. Note, this is a request for the summaries, not the complete validation studies. Okay. Laboratory personnel. So they want the information also from anybody that made contact with the evidence. So please provide background information for each person involved in conducting or reviewing the DNA testing performed in this case, including current resume, performance evaluations and performance file, and a summary of proficiency test results. So they're going to challenge every aspect of this DNA, from the way it was collected, the chain of custody, to where it was performed, the testing that was performed, who handled it, and their background to determine whether or not it was conducted in a proper manner in all assets. So, if they find something that was done that was out of, these guidelines, and they're going to try to get that evidence thrown out. And so unexpected results or corrective action for each laboratory that performed. And this is concerning. So if there was unexpected results, right, let's just say there is. Not saying that there is, but let's just, for the sake of argument, say that there was unexpected results or another unknown male, and the department, the lab, the prosecution did not turn that over to the defense. That is a Brady situation. That's flat out what it is. If there's any evidence that comes out that says that there's possibly was somebody else involved or whatnot, and they don't disclose that to the defense team, that is a Brady situation. We'll continue. For each laboratory that performed DNA testings in this case, please provide copies of the laboratory's logs and unexpected results and corrective actions. The logs should be provided for a time period beginning 6 months before the start of the testing and ending 6 months after the completion of testing. Documentation should be provided for unexpected results, events that arose due to the mechanical, chemical, and or an analyst operations, including contamination, the presence of extraneous DNA, sample handling errors, and or any other reason, the logs should be provided by all laboratory personnel, not just the analyst who performed the testing. In this case, please note this is a request for the logs themselves, not just for the entries within the logs that pertain to this case. So I'm assuming that's all they got was the entries within the logs that pertain to the case. Just a assumption there. So genetic genealogy testing and search, all reports generated by any lab that conducted an SNP testing on any sample, in this case, including samples where unknown males, not the defendant, were identified. Again, if there's any of that in there, that could become a Brady situation. Copies of all communications between the laboratory personnel and any other person or organization with regard to the instant case, including letters, memos, emails, internet posts, press releases, and records of other communications, including communications with regard to any DNA profile, uploaded to any public or private DNA database, all documentation associated with the database search, including but not limited to CODIS, NDIS, GED match, family tree, DNA, and other felon databases, case sample database, missing persons database, and internal quality assurance database. The documentation should include, but is not limited to, the input profile, the input search parameters, and the search output, all reports, all correspondence, and any follow-up actions. All documents related to genetic genealogy search include, but not limited to, the creation of user profile, accounts information, automated search results, uploading of data, all queries and search results from any private or public database, family tree information, and all other documentation, reports, notes, or other communications pertaining to genealogy DNA database searches. All documents related to genetic genealogy investigation, including but not limited to additional collection or testing of DNA samples, notes of any interviews, documents obtained related to ancestry and or recommendations for further testing. All documents related to the comparison of any DNA samples collected during the genealogy investigation to a crime scene evidence. And lastly, the name and addresses of all persons found to have sufficient sharing centimorgams with the subject profile to be identified as a match, report created in this case, filed day 3 of May 2023. So this was just, done yesterday. Main thing here, guys, is why does the defendant have to do a third supplemental request for discovery? Is that normal? Like I said, I'm not an attorney. I don't think it's normal. I don't understand why they would have to do so much request for discovery. But let me know in the comment section, what do you guys think about this documentation that's being put out there? This, in my opinion, isn't just a smokescreen. This isn't a Hail Mary. This isn't, any of those things. There would be no need to file this type of documentation unless there was discovery that they're not receiving. And I feel like that's the case in this situation. And what do you guys think of the fact that they're not requesting the discovery for the DNA of the victims found possibly in his apartment, his vehicle, on any of the clothing that they picked up, his shoes, any of those things? Do you guys think that there's a possibility that those items don't exist? Or maybe perhaps they're already handed over and the defense team is already aware of it? A lot to look into, a lot to think about. We're going to go live tomorrow night. Myself, Jaime, and Big Blue. Don't miss it. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. You don't want to miss tomorrow's show. I'll leave it at that. With that being said, I'm Daniel J. This is the Drunk Turkey Show. We'll see you next time or tomorrow night. Peace.